when my son-in-law threw red wine in my daughter's face during Thanksgiving dinner and said, "This is so you learn to respect me," I knew the time had come. I got up from the table, grabbed my cell phone, and made a call that would change everything. He had absolutely no idea who I really was. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I am 60 years old, and I live in a modest apartment in Chicago. My neighbors probably see me as a regular retired woman who tends to the plants on her balcony and takes morning walks in the park. They are not wrong, but there are parts of my life that I have never shared with anyone, not even with my daughter, Emily. I had not seen Emily in 6 months. 6 months since she married Preston Sterling and moved to that luxury-gated community in Lake Forest. At first, I thought it was normal. Newlyweds need space, time to build their lives. But the phone calls became rare, the visits ceased to exist, and whenever I tried to schedule something, there was always an excuse. The invitation for Thanksgiving dinner arrived via email, and it was not even from Emily. It was from Preston's secretary. A formal, cold email with a set date and time, as if I were attending a corporate board meeting. I thought about declining it, but the longing to see my daughter outweighed my pride. That Thursday, I drove out to the private estate where they lived. I passed through 3 security checkpoints, armed guards, and cameras on every corner. The house itself was massive glass, marble, an infinity pool overlooking a manicured lawn. It was the kind of place that ends up on the cover of architectural magazines. Preston opened the door. Tall, handsome, wearing an expensive suit even though it was a holiday. He looked at me with that polite smile of someone just fulfilling a protocol. "Margaret, so glad you could make it. The traffic must have been brutal coming all the way from the south side." It was not exactly a direct insult, but the way he said it carried a heavy weight. A subtle judgment about where I lived, about who I was. Emily appeared behind him, and my heart sank. She had lost way too much weight. Her face was tired, with deep dark circles that her makeup could not entirely hide. But when she saw me, her smile was genuine. "Mom," she said, hugging me quickly, as if she were afraid to show too much emotion. I could feel how frail she was in my arms. My daughter, who had always been so full of life and energy, seemed to be fading away. The inside of the house was even more intimidating. Vaulted ceilings, modern art on the walls, furniture that looked like museum pieces. Everything was spotless and sterile, feeling more like an art gallery than an actual home. In the main living room stood Richard Sterling, Preston's father, a man in his mid-60s with perfectly styled silver hair and a Rolex gleaming on his wrist. He had the posture of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He was on his cell phone, gesturing aggressively while closing some sort of deal. When he saw me, he did not hang up. He just gave a curt nod and went right back to his conversation. "No, I will not take a dime less. Either they meet my price or go find another investor." He hung up and finally looked at me. "Margaret, the retired public school teacher. Preston told me you taught in the city schools. That must have been quite the struggle." The word struggle came out of his mouth as if it were a synonym for failure. "It was very rewarding," I replied simply. "Well, rewarding does not pay the bills, does it? But anyway, to each their own." Dinner was served at a massive dining table, with enough room to seat 20 people. Fine china, crystal glasses, and an imported wine that Richard made sure to announce the price of. $200 a bottle, he bragged. "Do you know anything about wine, Margaret? Being a public school teacher, I imagine you are more accustomed to the boxed wine from the grocery store." He chuckled. Preston laughed right along with him. Emily stayed completely silent, just pushing the food around her plate. Richard's wife, Eleanor, sat at the far end of the table. She hardly spoke. She just smiled politely and nodded along with whatever her husband said. She was a woman who had given up her own voice a very long time ago. Throughout the meal, Richard dominated the conversation. He talked about his massive investment portfolios, the corporate buyouts he had orchestrated, and the senators he knew on a first-name basis. Everything was always about power, about money, about being at the very top of the food chain. Emily wanted to blow her money on that graphic design side hustle of hers, Richard said suddenly, aggressively slicing his turkey. I told her to forget about it. Real wealth is not built playing around on the internet. Emily swallowed hard. But I did a lot of market research, Richard. The industry is growing, and I already have a few clients. Clients? You call those clients? Making $500 a month designing logos for mom-and-pop corner stores? His voice rose, turning hostile. Preston makes more in a single afternoon than you make in a year with that little hobby of yours. Stop trying to play businesswoman and focus on being a proper wife. I looked at Preston, fully expecting him to defend his wife, but he just nodded. Dad is right, honey. You need to be more realistic. I watched my daughter shrink back into her chair. The same girl who had graduated with honors from a top state university, who had built an impressive portfolio entirely on her own, who was deeply talented and sharp. Right there, at that table, she was being treated like she was absolutely nothing. Emily has always been incredibly dedicated to her career, I said calmly. She has real talent. Richard turned to me with a condescending smirk. Margaret, with all due respect, you spent your entire life scraping by on a teacher's salary. You do not understand how real money works. Leave the serious business to the men. I felt the anger rising in my chest, but I took a deep breath. Years of experience had taught me how to keep my composure. The dinner dragged on in that suffocating, tense atmosphere. Richard criticized everything. The way Emily dressed, how much she spent on organic groceries, even the portion of food on her plate. You are putting on weight. Preston, your wife needs to take better care of herself. Men like women who put effort into their appearance, not women who let themselves go. Emily's hands were shaking. She had barely taken a bite. That was when it happened. Emily actually dared to disagree. Richard had made a comment about how she needed to drop her design work completely and focus solely on being a homemaker. She replied, her voice soft but steady, that she loved her job and that it made her happy. Happy? Richard stood up from his chair. Do you think marriage is about being happy? It is about playing your part, about respecting your husband and his family. I do respect you, Richard, but I also need to respect myself, she said. Richard's face turned bright red. He grabbed his crystal glass, still half full of red wine, and in one swift, violent motion, threw the liquid directly into Emily's face. The dark wine dripped down her cheeks, stained her white silk blouse, and splashed all over the table. The silence in the room was deafening. This is so you learn to respect me, he spat. And Preston, my son-in-law, the man who had stood at an altar and promised to love and protect my daughter, did absolutely nothing. Actually, it was worse than nothing. He smiled. Thanks, Dad. She really needed to learn her place. In that exact second, something inside me snapped. I did not scream. I did not slam my fists on the table or make a dramatic scene. Decades in my line of work had taught me that true power never requires a theatrical performance. I calmly stood up from my chair, picked up my purse, and spoke in a low, even tone. Excuse me, I need to make a quick phone call. I walked out into the grand hallway, far away from that dining room where my daughter was still sitting with wine dripping down her face and tears welling in her eyes. I took out my cell phone and scrolled to a very specific contact, Sarah Jenkins, Assistant United States Attorney, specialized in corporate fraud and money laundering for the Department of Justice. We had worked side by side for 20 years. She did not know that I was fully retired. In fact, nobody in that house knew what I actually did before I became just Margaret, the retired teacher. Because I was never just a teacher. That was my second career, the quiet life I chose after I retired from my first one. For 25 years, I was a special agent for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I specialized in unraveling complex offshore tax evasion and high-level corporate fraud. I was one of the best agents in the entire district. And as I listened to the phone ring, peering through the glass doors at that family of cruel, arrogant people, I knew exactly what I had to do. Because during dinner, amidst all the insults and the gloating, Richard Sterling had made a fatal, arrogant mistake. He had bragged. He bragged about all his businesses, his hidden accounts, his corporate loopholes. He thought he was just showing off to an ignorant, working-class retired teacher. But every single word he dropped was permanently logged in my memory. Every detail, every dollar amount, every shell company he casually named. And now, I was going to use every piece of it. The call was answered on the second ring. Sarah Jenkins speaking. "Sarah, it is Margaret Sullivan." There was a brief pause, and then I could practically hear the smile in her voice. "Maggie, it has been what, 3 years? Not since your retirement party. How are you?" "Sarah, I need to report a massive case, and it is incredibly urgent." Her tone shifted instantly. Professional, razor sharp. "Go ahead. I am listening." "Richard Sterling, corporate investor, real estate developer, lives in Lake Forest. I have reasonable suspicion of massive tax evasion, definite money laundering, multiple shell companies." "How in the world do you know all this?" "I am standing inside his house right now. Thanksgiving dinner. He spent the last 2 hours bragging about his entire operation. He thought he was just showing off to an ignorant old school teacher." Sarah let out a short, dry laugh. "They never learn, do they? What exactly do you have?" I took a deep breath, mentally organizing the mountain of information Richard had carelessly spilled. 3 front companies, all registered under straw men. He specifically boasted that he uses his own low-level corporate employees as the official owners on paper, but he maintains total financial control. He detailed offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands where he parks his unreported capital gains. He explicitly laid out a fake invoicing scheme he uses to artificially lower his corporate tax burden. And there was more. So much more. "Maggie, this is heavy hitting." "I know, and there is a ticking clock." During dinner, he mentioned he is wiring a massive sum of capital offshore first thing Monday morning. He said it in front of everyone like it was just regular dinner conversation. "If we wait, that money vanishes. Are you telling me I need to pull a warrant right now? On a federal holiday? I am telling you that if we wait until Monday, we drop the ball and lose the paper trail entirely." "And Maggie? Is there another reason you are pushing this right now?" I paused, looking back toward the dining room. "My daughter is married to his son. I just watched her get violently humiliated in a way I never thought I would witness. I am not impartial in this story, Sarah, but the federal crimes are real. The evidence is solid. How I feel personally does not change the facts." "Understood. Leave it to me. I am going to need a federal search warrant, and getting a federal judge to sign off on Thanksgiving night is going to be a nightmare. But I have my contacts. Give me the exact address and every single detail you can remember." I spent the next 15 minutes standing in that marble hallway, dictating every single thing I had heard. Corporate names, exact dollar amounts, even his casual jokes about aggressive tax optimization and cooking the books. When I finished, Sarah sighed. "Maggie, if even half of this checks out, this guy is going away for a very long time. I am mobilizing the task force right now. But you need to understand that this is going to blow up. Your daughter is going to be caught right in the crossfire." "I know, but she is already trapped in a nightmare. At least this way, she gets an exit door." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the gravity of what I had just done wash over me. There was no going back now. In a few hours, maybe less, federal agents were going to kick that custom mahogany door wide open. I walked back into the dining room. Emily had gone upstairs to change her clothes. Preston and Richard were sipping bourbon and talking about real estate, acting as if absolutely nothing had happened. Eleanor was quietly clearing the plates. "Is everything all right, Margaret?" Richard asked with a thick layer of fake politeness. "Health issues acting up?" "A woman your age really needs to monitor her blood pressure." "I feel fantastic. I just had to take care of some urgent business." I sat back down. The air was thick, but I played it perfectly cool. Richard went right back to talking, apparently incapable of going 5 minutes without hearing his own voice. "You know, Margaret, I started with absolutely nothing. My old man left me zero. Every single thing I own, I built with sheer intellect and relentless hard work. Intellect. That was what he called tax fraud and money laundering." "That must be incredibly rewarding," I noted neutrally. "It is all about knowing where to park your assets, how to shield your wealth from the government. The average person just does not get it. They pay their taxes like idiots, following the rules like sheep. I learned how to actually play the game. Every single word out of his mouth was just another nail in his coffin, just another confirmation that I had made the right call." Emily came back downstairs wearing a different sweater. Her eyes were still red, but she had pulled herself together. She sat down quietly, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "are you okay?" She nodded yes, but looked at the floor. I knew my daughter way too well to buy that. The dinner dragged on for another excruciating hour. Richard drank more wine, became louder, and got even more convinced of his own brilliance. Preston mirrored his every move, nodding along, laughing at his terrible jokes, playing the perfect little corporate prince. Eleanor remained completely invisible, just a decorative piece of furniture. And I just observed. I watched the toxic machinery of that family, the way they tore each other down, the casual cruelty heavily disguised as normal wealthy behavior. At 10 at night, I thanked them for the meal and announced I was heading out. Leaving already? Well, the expressways should be clear by now. I get it, you must be exhausted. Age catches up to all of us, doesn't it? Richard sneered. I really am quite tired, I agreed, grabbing my coat. Emily walked me out to the grand foyer. Once we were out of earshot, I grabbed both of her hands. Mom, I am so sorry about tonight. I had no idea it was going to turn into that. Honey, this is not your fault. It never was. I feel so trapped. I do not know how to get out of this. I looked into her eyes and saw the exact same resilient little girl I had raised all on my own after her father walked out on us. The strong woman she had always been, now completely shattered on the inside. Sometimes the exit appears when we least expect it. Just trust me. She hugged me so tightly. I felt her warm tears soaking into my shoulder. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world. I got into my car and drove back to my apartment. It was a long drive, almost an hour back into the city. I used the quiet time to process everything, to ensure my conscience was clear. This was not petty revenge. I could call it justice, but it would be a lie to say it was not deeply personal. It was protection. It was doing what had to be done to pull my daughter out of a burning building. I got home close to 11. My simple 2-bedroom apartment had never felt so safe and welcoming. I changed into my pajamas, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and sat by the window. At 12:30 in the morning, my cell phone rang. Maggie, it is Sarah. We got the warrant signed. The raid goes down at 6 in the morning. Full tactical team. IRSCI and the FBI, fully coordinated. That fast? When I laid out the flight risk for the Capitol and the urgency of the Monday wire transfer, the judge signed it on the spot. Plus, your name still carries a lot of weight in this town. When I told the director the intel came directly from you, they fast-tracked the whole operation. I felt a sudden tightness in my chest, a heavy sense of responsibility, a fleeting fear that I had let my emotions cloud my professional judgment. Sarah, I need you to be honest with me. Do you think I am pulling this trigger for the wrong reasons? Maggie, in the 2 decades we took down white-collar criminals together, never once did you hand me a baseless lead. If you say the fraud is there, the fraud is there. Your personal motivations do not magically make the federal evidence disappear. Thank you. Just one more thing. You need to brace yourself. This is going to hit the local news. High-profile real estate mogul. A federal raid on a holiday weekend. The press will be swarming, and my daughter is going to be dragged right into the spotlight. I know, but she is already living in a nightmare. At least this way, she gets her exit door. I hung up the phone and crawled into bed, but sleep never came. I stared at the ceiling for hours, running through every worst-case scenario. At exactly 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed again. We are breaching the doors right now. Sarah's voice was pure ice, utterly professional. In the background, I could hear heavy boots, shouting, and the screech of tires. How is it looking? They are in absolute shock. Richard tried to scream for his corporate lawyers, but we already bagged all the phones. We are seizing the hard drives, the ledgers, everything. She paused. Maggie, your intel was surgical. We are already finding preliminary ledgers that back up everything you said. And my daughter? She is terrified, but she is complying. We made it very clear. She is not a target of the federal probe, but we are going to need her sworn statement eventually. I took a deep breath. That is fine. She will fully cooperate. I spent the rest of that Friday morning pacing my living room in high alert. I desperately wanted to call Emily, but I knew I could not interfere with an active federal raid. I had to let the DOJ do its job. At 2 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it, and Emily practically collapsed into my arms, sobbing hysterically. "Mom, was it you?" The FBI raided the house. They took Richard in handcuffs. They seized all the cars, the computers. They said a whistleblower tipped them off. "Was it you?" I pulled her inside and sat her down on my worn-out sofa. "It was me." She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "How? Why?" "Because for 25 years of my life, I investigated high-level financial crimes for the federal government. Before I became a public school teacher, I was a special agent. And yesterday, during Thanksgiving dinner, Richard Sterling confessed to multiple federal felonies right to my face because he was too arrogant to think I was smart enough to understand him." Emily sat in complete silence for a very long time, her brain struggling to process the reality. "You never told me." "I know. When I retired, I wanted a clean break. I wanted to just be your mother, without the heavy baggage of carrying a badge. I went back to school, got my teaching degree, and built a quiet life. But the instincts never go away, and when I watched that monster throw wine in your face, and I watched my son-in-law laugh at your humiliation, I knew I had to end it." She started crying again. "Preston is furious. He was screaming that you destroyed our family. He said it was a total lie, a witch hunt. It is not a lie. And Emily, you need to make a choice right now. You can stay by his side and go down with that ship, or you can protect yourself. I do not know if I have the strength to leave him." I grabbed her hands tightly. "You absolutely do. You are so much stronger than you think. But it is your choice. Whatever you decide, I will stand by you." Emily stayed at my apartment that Friday. She did not go back to Lake Forest. Preston called her cell phone 17 times, but she sent every single one to voicemail. That night, sitting in my small living room, she finally opened up. Really opened up. No filters, no making excuses for him. "It started so small, Mom. In the beginning, it was just a little joke here, a passive-aggressive comment there. I thought it was just how rich families operated, you know? That dark country club humor. I figured I would just adapt." She was shredding a paper napkin in her hands, staring blankly at the wall. After the wedding, it escalated. Richard started dictating everything. What I wore, how I styled my hair, my career. He always spun it like he was just trying to mentor me, to polish me up. Preston agreed with every word his dad said. "And you never told me any of this." I was so ashamed. I was ashamed to admit that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. "You warned me about rushing into the marriage, remember? But I was so deeply in love. I actually believed love could fix it. I poured us both some hot tea. Outside, Chicago was moving through its normal Friday night rhythm. Inside, my daughter's entire reality was unraveling. My graphic design business was the first thing I fought to keep for myself. It was the only part of my day where I still felt like Emily. But they chipped away at that too, telling me it was a pathetic waste of time, that I needed to focus on managing the estate. "The estate that has a full-time housekeeping staff," I pointed out. Exactly. I had literally nothing to do. I would wander around that giant, empty mansion all day, just waiting for Preston to come home from the firm. And when he did, his only concern was whether I had done anything to embarrass his father. She stopped and took a slow sip of tea. "Last night was not the first time someone threw something at me." My stomach dropped to the floor. "What?" "Last month. Richard threw a hot plate of food at my head because I supposedly ruined the seasoning. It missed me. It shattered against the dining room wall. Preston told me it was my own fault for provoking him, that I knew his dad was a perfectionist about his meals." I breathed in deeply, locking down the rage that was screaming inside my head. "Why didn't you pack a bag and come to me?" "Because I was terrified you would do exactly what you just did. And because, on some sick level, they had convinced me I deserved it. They brainwashed me into believing I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, too dramatic, that I just did not know how to behave in high society. That is textbook psychological abuse, Emily. They groomed you. I see that now. But when you are trapped inside the bubble, hearing it every single day, it becomes your reality." We stayed up all night talking. She purged 3 years of toxic marriage that she had been carrying all on her own. The relentless humiliation, the extreme financial abuse where they monitored every dollar she spent, the daily attacks on her sanity and self-worth. On Saturday morning, Sarah called me. "Maggie, quick update. The raid yielded way more than we projected. We found secondary ledgers proving systemic tax fraud going back at least 8 years. We are talking over $10 million in evaded federal taxes. Is Richard in federal custody? Remanded without bail. His high-priced defense attorneys are practically begging the judge, but given the flight risk and the sheer volume of offshore evidence, he is not seeing sunlight anytime soon. We are also actively investigating Preston. His signature is all over the incorporation documents for the shell companies." I looked over at Emily, who was standing in my small kitchen brewing coffee. "The son is implicated? Highly likely. We are still establishing his exact level of criminal intent, but his name is on a lot of very dirty paperwork. What is the next move? Now comes the grinding bureaucracy. Forensic accounting, subpoenaing bank records, deposing the corporate whistleblowers. It will take months to build the grand jury indictment. But Maggie, this case is a slam dunk. It is rock solid." I hung up the phone and sat down at the table as Emily poured the coffee. "Preston is a target of the federal investigation now, too." She did not even flinch. "I figured he was. I used to overhear them constantly whispering about restructuring the assets. I always played dumb, but I am not an idiot. You need an attorney, your own attorney, today. I do not have a dime to my name, Mom. Every dollar I made from my design clients went straight into a joint account that Preston completely controlled. I know a shark, one of the best family law attorneys in the city. I am calling her." I dialed Olivia Davis, a relentless divorce attorney I had crossed paths with years ago when I testified in a messy financial asset dispute. I gave her a quick rundown of the federal raid. "Send your daughter to my downtown office first thing Monday morning. The consultation is on the house," Olivia said. "And Maggie, she needs to file for an emergency divorce petition immediately, before the feds freeze every single marital asset they have." On Sunday afternoon, Preston showed up at my apartment building. The lobby buzzer rang. "Mrs. Sullivan, there is a young man down here demanding to come up. Says he is your son-in-law. Do not let him pass the desk. If he causes a scene, call the Chicago police." 5 minutes later, my cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Margaret, it is Preston. We need to talk right now. We have absolutely nothing to discuss. You ruined my entire family. My dad is sitting in a federal holding cell because of your psychotic lies." I kept my voice perfectly deadpan. "I did not lie to the FBI, and I did not ruin your family. Your father did that all by himself the second he decided to commit federal tax fraud. Emily is my wife. You cannot hold her hostage in that dump. She is here because she wants to be here. She is a grown woman capable of making her own choices. Put her on the phone. Now." I looked at Emily. She vigorously shook her head no. She has no interest in speaking with you. "This is not a hostage situation, Preston. Do not be ridiculous. Your wife is in a safe place, figuring out her future. A future that no longer involves you." He slammed the phone down. First thing Monday morning, I walked Emily into Olivia Davis's high-rise law firm. Olivia was in her 50s, sharp suit, and possessed a gaze that could cut through steel. "Emily, I do not sugarcoat things," Olivia started. "You need to file for divorce today, right now, before the Department of Justice drops a massive asset forfeiture on your husband's head. But I think I still love him," Emily whispered, looking at her hands. "Sweetheart, love is not enough when the person is actively destroying you, and he will keep destroying you. Men who smile while their wives are abused do not magically change." Olivia flipped open a legal pad. "I am filing for an at-fault divorce, citing extreme psychological cruelty and immediate risk to your emotional safety. I am also filing an emergency injunction to sever your financial liability from any debts or restitution tied to your husband's criminal federal indictments." "I am going to walk away with absolutely nothing," Emily said, her voice cracking. "Better to walk away with nothing and be free than stay rich and end up indicted for conspiracy," Olivia replied flatly. The paperwork was filed at the county courthouse that exact same afternoon. Within 48 hours, Preston was formally served. He showed up at my building again on Thursday. This time, he somehow manipulated a delivery driver into holding the lobby door open, bypassing security entirely. When a hard knock hit my door, I checked the peephole. It was Preston. He looked like a ghost. Exhausted, deep bags under his eyes, sporting a 3-day beard. I unlatched the deadbolt, but kept the heavy security chain locked in place. "What do you want?" "I just want to talk to my wife." "Your future ex-wife," he corrected himself, rubbing his face in defeat. "Margaret, please. I know I blew it. I know I was a garbage husband. But I love Emily. I really do. You have a deeply twisted way of showing affection. My dad is looking at federal prison time. He is probably going to be convicted. I am facing an indictment myself. My entire life is burning to the ground." He swallowed hard. I just want to tell her how sorry I am." There was something genuinely broken in his voice. "Wait 1 minute. And understand this. Just because she agrees to hear you out does not mean anything changes." Emily was sitting on the edge of the guest bed. I walked in. Preston is at the door. He wants 5 minutes. All the color drained from her face. "I do not think I can look at him." "You do not have to. Say the word and I will throw him out." "No, I think. I need to hear it. I need closure." She walked to the front door. I stood right behind her, ready to slam it shut if he tried anything. "Hi," Preston choked out, keeping his voice low. "Hi, Preston. I am so sorry. For everything. For being a pathetic coward. For letting my dad treat you like dirt. For smiling when he threw that drink in your face. I have 0 excuses." "No, you do not. I was raised in a bubble where that toxic garbage was totally normal. Where being a man meant being ruthless and showing dominance meant tearing other people down. My dad drilled that into my head since I was a kid. You are a 30-year-old man, Preston. You had the power to make different choices. I know. And I chose wrong. Every single time." He took a shaky breath. "I am not asking you to call off the divorce. I know I do not deserve you. I just needed to look you in the eyes and tell you that none of this was your fault. It was never your fault. You are brilliant and talented and incredibly strong. And I tried to crush that out of you because I was terrified you would wake up one day and realize you deserved way better than me." Emily was crying now. "Why didn't you defend me? Not even once?" "Because I am weak. And because I was deathly afraid of losing my inheritance and my father's approval. Which is pathetic, I know. But it is the honest truth. You really are not going to fight the divorce? No. You deserve to be happy. And it is blatantly obvious it is not going to be with me." He took a step back into the hallway. "Just one last thing. Your mom. She did the right thing. Dropping the hammer on my dad. I was blind with rage at first, but now I get it. He needed to be stopped. And if you hadn't gotten out when you did, I would have eventually morphed into a carbon copy of him." Preston turned around and walked toward the elevators. Emily collapsed against the doorframe, sobbing. I guided her back to the couch and wrapped my arms around her. "At least he was finally honest," I said quietly. "It does not change anything, Mom. It does not erase the last 3 years. It does not erase it, honey. But maybe it gives you permission to finally close the book." She rested her head on my shoulder. "How did you know? How did you know his business was so incredibly illegal?" "Because for 25 years, I hunted men exactly like Richard Sterling. Arrogant men who believe the rules are only for the poor. Men who treat human beings like disposable objects. And every single time, without fail, there was always massive corporate fraud hiding right behind their shiny veneer of success. Do you think I made the right call? Serving him with papers? I think you made the only choice that leads to actual survival. If you want a real life, a life where you are respected, where your career matters, where you do not have to beg for permission just to breathe. Yes, you made the right call." She was quiet for a long time. "I am starting over with nothing. No money, no house, 0 safety net. You have yourself, Emily. And that is the most valuable asset you will ever own." The next few months were an absolute whirlwind. The federal probe into Richard Sterling blew wide open. The IRS uncovered a web of corruption much larger than we initially thought, involving not just offshore tax evasion, but bribing city zoning officials and using dummy corporations to wash illicit funds. The Chicago media ate it up. Luxury real estate mogul indicted in massive fraud ring, the headlines blasted. Pictures of Richard doing the perp walk in handcuffs were plastered across every morning broadcast. My name was never leaked as the federal whistleblower. Sarah Jenkins and the DOJ kept my identity completely sealed under strict protection protocols. But within the Sterling's elite social circles, everybody knew. And everyone had an opinion. Emily received a barrage of vicious text messages from Preston's country club friends, calling me a vindictive traitor who destroyed a prominent family over a petty personal grudge. She blocked every single one of them. Eleanor, Richard's wife, filed for a high-profile divorce a mere 2 weeks after the FBI raid. It is remarkable how quickly unconditional love evaporates when the offshore bank accounts are frozen by the federal government. Preston was formally indicted as a co-conspirator on several lesser federal charges. He was not operating at his father's kingpin level, but he was legally exposed enough to face real prison time. He ended up taking a plea deal, flipping on his father and handing over internal corporate hard drives in exchange for leniency. Emily's divorce was finalized in record time. Olivia Davis was an absolute bulldozer in the courtroom. Because all the Sterling assets were locked down under federal civil forfeiture, and the paper trail proved the wealth was built on racketeering, Emily was not entitled to a single dime of alimony. But Olivia ensured Emily was completely shielded from the millions of dollars in federal restitution and IRS penalties. She walked out of that marriage exactly how she walked in, with no money, but with her total freedom. It is such a bizarre feeling. She told me one night over takeout at my apartment. 3 years ago, I had a sprawling mansion, an imported luxury SUV, unlimited credit cards. And tonight I own exactly 1 suitcase of clothes and my laptop. But I feel infinitely richer. Because you own your own soul again. She had slowly returned to her freelance graphic design. She started small, picking up cheap online contracts. She would stay up until 2 in the morning working out of my guest room, which had morphed into her makeshift design studio. Slowly, I watched her come back to life. The creative spark that they had tried so hard to extinguish reignited. The ideas started flowing again. Her real smile came back. 2 months after the divorce decree, she saved up enough to rent a tiny apartment in Logan Square. It was barely a studio, but it was entirely hers. "Mom, you have to come see it." I went over on moving day. The space was microscopic compared to the sprawling estate in Lake Forest, but it was vibrant. It had character. It had life. "It is absolutely perfect," I told her, meaning every word. "It is nowhere near perfect. The shower has 0 water pressure, the fridge hums like a lawnmower, and there is a suspicious water stain on the ceiling. But it is mine." She spun around in the center of the tiny room, beaming. For the first time in 3 years, I can fall asleep without the crippling anxiety of waking up to a critique. I do not have to walk on eggshells in my own hallway. I can eat a bagel at midnight without someone lecturing me about my waistline or analyzing the grocery receipt. I helped her unpack her few boxes. A cheap mattress on a metal frame, a second-hand desk for her laptop, some basic clothes, universes away from the walk-in closets of Lake Forest. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked, gently. "The luxury?" She paused, holding a coffee mug. "I miss the convenience of never checking my bank balance before buying groceries, but I do not miss the life itself. Because none of that was actual luxury. It was a prison with marble floors, but a prison nonetheless." Richard Sterling's federal trial began in September, 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner. I was subpoenaed to testify not as a victim, but as an expert witness for the prosecution. The DOJ needed me to walk the jury through exactly how I identified the financial crimes based purely on the dinner table conversation. I walked into the federal courthouse wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. Richard was seated at the defense table. He looked like he had aged a decade in 6 months. When he locked eyes with me, his face twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. His high-priced defense attorney immediately tried to destroy my credibility on cross-examination. "Mrs. Sullivan, is it not true that you harbor a deep, personal vendetta against my client? Is it not true that your daughter had an incredibly hostile divorce from his son? It is a matter of public record that my daughter divorced his son, counselor, but my family dynamics do not magically alter the forensic accounting of this case. Do you not find it awfully convenient that you suddenly discovered these alleged felonies right after a heated family dispute? I took a breath, anchoring myself in the icy calm that decades on the witness stand had taught me. There was no dispute. There was an unprovoked physical assault. Your line of questioning implies that I somehow fabricated federal bank records out of thin air because I was holding a grudge. The millions in offshore wire transfers were verified by IRS forensic auditors, not by me. I merely reported the blatant confession I heard. The grand jury indictment was built on hard banking data, signed contracts, and cooperating witnesses. My personal feelings about your client's complete lack of morality are entirely irrelevant to the mountain of documentary evidence sitting on that table. But you initiated the federal probe, did you not? Yes. Just as any citizen has the legal and moral obligation to do when they witness a felony in progress, a citizen conveniently trained by the government to target exactly this kind of behavior. Is counsel suggesting that my professional expertise is a liability? If a trauma surgeon witnesses a car crash and accurately diagnoses a collapsed lung before the ambulance arrives, does her medical degree make her 911 call less credible or more? The assistant U.S. attorney was actively trying to hide a smirk. The defense lawyer was drowning. No further questions, he muttered, aggressively shuffling his legal pads. The prosecution then led me through the technical details. I broke down, in plain English that the jury could easily digest, how I spotted the classic red flags of tax evasion and money laundering hidden inside Richard's arrogant bragging. I detailed his admission of using minimum wage employees as the legal directors of shell companies, pushing millions of dollars. I explained his offshore routing methods. I translated his jokes about optimizing his taxes into the exact federal statutes he was violating. To a trained federal agent, his dinner conversation was a signed confession. The trial lasted 2 brutal weeks. The paper trail was absolutely suffocating. Spreadsheets, secret ledgers, and devastating testimony from his former corporate accountants who had all taken immunity deals. Then, Preston took the stand as a star witness for the prosecution. It was grim to watch. He essentially buried his own father to shave years off his own sentence. My dad conditioned me from day one to treat the tax code like a joke. Preston testified, refusing to look at the defense table. He constantly preached that only gullible losers paid everything they owed, and that smart men knew how to rig the system. Richard glared at his son with a terrifying mix of rage and absolute disgust. Whatever was left of their family was completely incinerated in that courtroom. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict was crushing, guilty, on all 42 counts. Sentencing came down a week later. The federal judge showed zero mercy. Mr. Sterling, you did not just evade taxes and launder money. You constructed an entire empire built on aggressive fraud, all while looking down your nose at the working-class citizens who actually follow the laws of this country. Your arrogance is staggering. I sentence you to 144 months in a federal penitentiary, followed by a $2 million punitive fine, and the total forfeiture of all assets connected to your criminal enterprise. 12 years. Richard was let out in chains. He did not look at a single person in the gallery. Preston was handed a 3-year sentence. Given his extensive cooperation and lack of prior convictions, the judge went light on him. Emily did not attend the sentencing. She was waiting for me at my apartment when I got back. Well, she asked. 12 years for Richard. 3 for Preston. She did not cheer. She did not cry. She just nodded slowly. They earned it. Yes, they did. She brewed us some coffee, and we sat on my small balcony. You know what is really messed up? A tiny part of me actually pities Preston. That is not messed up at all, Emily. You loved him. It is a tragedy. He could have chosen a completely different path. If he had just found the spine to walk away from his father's toxic money, he would be free right now. But he didn't. And now he is paying the invoice. She took a slow sip of her coffee. And me? Did I make the right choice? Pulling the plug? You saved your own life, You ripped yourself out of a machine that was slowly crushing you to death. You are rebuilding your business. You are surviving. I would say you made the only choice. Months turned into seasons. Life settled into a new, quiet rhythm. Emily exploded professionally. Her freelance hustle morphed into a legitimate boutique design agency. She hired 2 junior designers and leased a gritty, exposed brick office space in the West Loop. It was not a glass high-rise, but it was highly profitable. She started casually dating again. Nothing intense. She was just testing the waters, figuring out who she was outside of a crisis. I settled deeply into my retirement. Yoga classes on Tuesdays, long walks along Lake Michigan, tending to my balcony garden. But sometimes, usually late at night, my mind would drift back to that Thanksgiving, to that phone call. Did I do the right thing? Legally, absolutely. Morally, I still sleep soundly believing I did, but I would be lying if I said there was no collateral damage. Emily lost 3 years of her youth to a narcissist. Preston, despite his cowardice, had his entire future annihilated. Eleanor was left bagging groceries, and I had to carry the heavy knowledge that one single phone call from my living room put 2 men in federal lockup. It was never about revenge. I swear it wasn't. But did I feel a dark sense of satisfaction? Yes. Watching a deeply cruel, untouchable man finally slam face first into the consequences of his own arrogance was profoundly satisfying. A year after the gavel dropped on the trial, on a crisp Saturday morning, the lobby buzzer rang. "Mrs. Sullivan, there is a woman down here asking for you." An Eleanor Sterling. I froze. Richard's ex-wife. We had not spoken a single word since that horrific Thanksgiving dinner. "Send her up, please." I quickly tidied up the living room and put a pot of coffee on. I had absolutely no idea what to expect. A screaming match? A lawsuit threat? When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. Eleanor looked entirely different. The heavy, severe makeup was gone. The designer labels were replaced by a simple, off-the-rack sweater and jeans. The aura of quiet, suffocating superiority had vanished. She actually looked human. "Margaret, thank you for seeing me. I know I have zero right to be standing on your welcome mat." "Come in, Eleanor. Can I get you some coffee?" We sat down in my living room. She looked around, seemingly a bit out of place in my modest apartment. "I imagine you are wondering why I am here." "I am definitely curious," I admitted. She took a shaky breath. "I came to apologize, face to face, for the horrific way I treated you and your daughter, for sitting there like a mute coward, while my husband destroyed her self-esteem, for being totally complicit in that nightmare." That was the absolute last thing I expected her to say. What changed? Everything changed. When Richard was hauled off to federal prison and the government froze every bank account with my name on it, I was forced to take a long, hard look in the mirror for the first time in 30 years. And I was disgusted by the woman staring back at me. She nervously traced the rim of her coffee mug. I spent 3 decades playing the flawless trophy wife to a complete monster. I willfully ignored his corporate crimes, his cruelty, the way he destroyed people for sport, all because I liked flying private and shopping in Paris. When the feds stripped all of that away, I realized I had sold my soul for a discount. "Why are you telling me this, Eleanor?" "Because when you made that phone call, you did not just save Emily. You saved me too. I stayed in that toxic marriage out of pure, paralyzing fear. Fear of being broke, fear of losing my country club status. You forced me to face that exact nightmare. And you know what I found out? I am so much tougher than I ever gave myself credit for." She smiled, and it actually reached her eyes. "I got a job. My first real job since I was in college. I work customer service at a mid-tier department store. I make $14 an hour. I live in a cramped rental apartment that is roughly the size of my old shoe closet. And Margaret, I am happier right now than I have been in 30 years. I am genuinely glad to hear that, Eleanor. I know an apology does not fix the past. It does not erase the fact that I just sat there while Richard threw a glass of wine at your child. But I needed you to know that I own my failures. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for having the guts to pull the trigger when the rest of us were too cowardly to speak up." We ended up talking for another hour. She told me about her intensive therapy sessions, about how she was slowly, painfully rebuilding bridges with her children from her first marriage kids she had abandoned decades ago because Richard demanded she cut ties. "You know what terrifies me the most?" Eleanor said at the door, realizing that I had willingly morphed into the exact type of shallow, materialistic monster I used to mock when I was in my 20s. "The only thing that matters is that you woke up. And you are putting in the work. How is Emily holding up?" "She is thriving. Her business is booming. She is really happy. Can you pass on a message for me? Tell her I am so deeply sorry for failing her, and I wish her nothing but the absolute best." After Eleanor left, I sat in the quiet apartment and let it all sink in. That Thanksgiving dinner had not just taken down a corrupt real estate empire. It had been a massive earthquake, forcing everyone in the blast radius to confront their demons. For Richard, it brought a devastating, well-earned ruin. For Eleanor and Emily, it was a brutal, agonizing awakening that ultimately set them free. And for me, it made me reevaluate exactly what my responsibility is when I see evil operating in plain sight. The following month, an envelope arrived in my mail. It had a federal prison return address. It was from Preston. I debated throwing it directly into the trash. Emily had moved on. She was healing. Reopening that dark chapter felt reckless, but my investigator instincts won out. I opened it. "Margaret, I am writing this fully aware that you will probably shred it without reading past the first line. But I had to get this out of my head. I have spent the last 12 months sitting in a concrete cell with nothing but time. Time to dissect who I was, the choices I made, and the pathetic excuse for a man I had become. The truth is ugly. My father hardwired me to be a clone of him. Arrogant, vicious, wholly convinced that the laws of gravity did not apply to our bank accounts. I mentally abused Emily. I let my dad treat her like a stray dog. I smirked when he assaulted her. And the sickest part? I actually thought playing the ruthless enforcer made me a strong man. I was a spineless coward. You did what I was supposed to do. You protected my wife. The only difference is, you had a spine, and I did not. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve an ounce of it, and I fully expect Emily to despise me for the rest of her life. But I needed you to know that the fog has lifted. What you did wasn't a revenge plot. It was justice. It was a mother acting like a mother. You stepped up and became the protector I promised to be, but failed to be. When I get paroled in 2 years, I am going to try to be a different person. I do not know if I can pull it off, but I am going to try, because I am terrified of becoming my father. Thank you for rescuing Emily from me, Preston." I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. I never mentioned it to Emily. That letter was his burden to carry, not hers. If he truly intended to change his life, the next few decades would prove it. 2 more years passed. Emily's design firm had grown to 8 full-time employees. She had just won a prestigious regional branding award, and she was seriously dating a wonderful man named Daniel. He was a high school history teacher, divorced, with an incredibly bright 7-year-old daughter. He was kind, grounded, and treated Emily like a true equal. "He is just wired so differently than Preston, Mom," she told me over coffee. "If we disagree, he actually listens to my logic. When I land a big corporate client, he brags about me to his friends. If I make a mistake, he does not weaponize it against me. This is how normal relationships are supposed to function. I just had to walk through a burning building to figure it out." One Sunday afternoon, while I was preparing lunch in my kitchen, Daniel pulled me aside. "Margaret, I know Emily's history with her ex-husband was traumatic. She told me everything. I just want to look you in the eye and promise you that I will never, ever put her in a position where she feels small or silenced." That is a great speech, Daniel. But in my experience, talk is incredibly cheap. Actions are the only currency that matters. He smiled warmly. "I completely agree. And I look forward to spending the rest of my life proving it to you with my actions. I want to ask her to marry me, and I would love your blessing." I watched him across the room as he interacted with Emily. He looked at her with such profound respect and admiration. He asked for her input. He laughed at her terrible jokes. He constantly elevated her. "You have my blessing, Daniel," I said. "But understand this. If you ever cross the line and intentionally break her spirit, you will be dealing directly with me." He laughed, but held my gaze. "Fair enough. And knowing what I know about your previous career at the IRS, I take that threat extremely seriously." They got married 6 months later. It was a small, intimate ceremony in the botanical gardens, just close friends and immediate family. Simple, elegant, and full of genuine joy. Seeing Emily in her vintage lace dress, glowing with actual happiness, was the defining moment of my life. "Are you okay, Mom?" she whispered as I adjusted her veil before she walked down the aisle. "I am perfect, sweetheart. You look perfect. Thank you. For everything. For pulling the fire alarm, for having my back, for never giving up on me. Always, baby. Always." Life rolled on. I happily took on the role of a bonus grandmother to Daniel's daughter, who started calling me Grammy Maggie. Richard Sterling was still rotting in federal prison. He had applied for early compassionate release, but the parole board slapped it down because he refused to show a shred of genuine remorse. Preston finished his sentence and disappeared. Rumor had it he moved out west to Denver, working a quiet accounting job in a mid-sized firm, living off the grid. He never once tried to reach out to Emily. Respecting the restraining order was the only decent choice he ever made. Eleanor remarried a retired college professor she met in her trauma support group. They lived a very quiet, modest life in the suburbs. She sent me a heartfelt Christmas card every single December. As for me, I just went back to being Margaret, a retired woman watering her balcony tomatoes and spoiling her grandkids. But occasionally, when I watched the evening news and saw some arrogant Wall Street billionaire skating on fraud charges, that old fire would flare up in my chest. The deep, ingrained urge to run a background check, pull the tax filings, and drag them into a federal courtroom. But I had served my time. I had fought my wars. It was time for peace, or so I thought. Until my niece, Chloe, brought her brand new boyfriend to our Sunday family potluck. His name was Trent. He was a luxury real estate broker. Flashy, overly confident, dripping in designer cologne, and absolutely obsessed with talking about his massive commercial deals. Over a plate of baked ziti, Trent casually leaned back and said, "The real trick to dominating commercial real estate is layering your LLCs through third-party proxies. That way, the federal regulators can never actually trace the capital gains back to your personal accounts." I stopped chewing. I slowly looked across the table at Chloe. She was 28, brilliant but somewhat naive when it came to reading people. She was looking at Trent like he was a genius. She only saw a successful, wealthy charmer. She was completely blind to the neon red flags that were practically screaming in my face. Emily caught my eye from across the room. She knew exactly what that look on my face meant. After everyone packed up and left, Emily stayed behind to help me load the dishwasher. "Are you going to open a file on him?" she asked quietly. "I am just going to do a little casual observing, gather some open-source intelligence. Maybe it is just my professional paranoia flaring up. Or maybe your radar is dead on. Trust your gut, Mom." I smiled. My daughter had learned the game. We will see. I need hard data before I start throwing accusations around. Chloe is head over heels for this guy. I know. That is exactly why you need to dig. If you are wrong, no harm done. If you are right, you save her from walking into a buzzsaw. The very next morning, I made a totally off-the-record phone call to Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah, hypothetical question. Does the DOJ currently have an open file on a Chicago real estate broker named Trent Vance?" There was a long pause on the line. "Maggie, officially, I cannot confirm or deny ongoing federal probes. Unofficially, he is glowing hot on our radar. We suspect he is running a massive property flipping scheme to launder dirty cash. But we do not have the smoking gun paper trail to authorize a raid yet." "Copy that. Thanks, Sarah." "Maggie, if you stumble across any internal ledgers, I am officially retired, Sarah. Have a great week." I decided to play this one differently. I didn't want Chloe to suffer the trauma Emily went through. I invited Chloe out for a private lunch. "Aunt Maggie, it is so good to see you," she beamed. We ordered salads, made small talk, and then I flipped the switch. "Chloe, I need to ask you some highly sensitive questions about Trent, and I need you to give me the absolute truth." She immediately got defensive. Do you not like him? This has nothing to do with liking his personality. It is about keeping you out of federal prison. Do you know exactly how he is funding a lifestyle with $200,000 sports cars and monthly trips to Dubai on a standard broker's commission? He is a top-tier closer. He moves commercial real estate. Chloe, I spent 25 years at the IRS hunting financial ghosts. I know what a money launderer's balance sheet looks like, and his math does not add up. She crossed her arms, glaring at me. Are you secretly investigating my boyfriend? I am trying to protect you, which is exactly what family is supposed to do. Do you realize he is currently an active target of a federal DOJ investigation? All the color washed out of her face. What? No. No way. Suspicion of felony money laundering. They are building the case as we speak. I am telling you this so you do not get caught in the blast radius when the FBI kicks his door in. Tears welled up in her eyes. I really thought I found the one. Someone who wanted to build a real life with me. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. He might genuinely care about you. But that does not erase the fact that he is highly likely washing dirty money. If you stay tied to him, you become an accessory. What do I do? First, act completely normal. Do not tip him off. Second, untangle your life. Do not sign a single lease. Do not open any joint accounts. Do not co-sign a loan. Get your name far away from his paperwork. Chloe was shattered, but she was smart. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my apartment carrying a thick manila folder. I found this in his home office, she whispered, terrified. He was in the shower. I know I shouldn't have snooped, but I had to know. I put on my reading glasses and opened the file. It was a stack of commercial real estate deeds. Look at the dates, Aunt Maggie. He sold the exact same commercial warehouse 4 different times in a 6-month window. And every time, the sale price magically doubled. I felt a cold rush of adrenaline. This is it. This is the smoking gun. This is textbook phantom flipping. He is inflating the asset values on paper to wash millions in illicit cash into the legitimate banking system. I took high-resolution photos of every single page. Chloe, you are breaking up with him tonight. You are going completely no contact. She ended it that evening. Trent, predictably, lost his mind. He blew up her phone, threatened her, and actually showed up screaming in the lobby of her corporate office. That was when I stepped in. I called his personal cell phone. Trent, this is Margaret Sullivan, Chloe's aunt. Listen to me, old lady. You stay the hell out of my relationship. It becomes my business when you start stalking my niece. You are going to respect her boundaries and walk away. He laughed maliciously. Or what? What are you going to do? Google my name. Margaret Sullivan. Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. 25 years auditing men significantly smarter and much more dangerous than you. Dead silence on the line. That is right. And I am currently staring at high-resolution copies of your phantom flipping ledgers. The warehouse you sold 4 times in 6 months? I have the dummy LLC names. I have the wire transfer dates. I have the entire laundering trail mapped out. I could hear his breathing turn rapid and shallow. So here is the deal, Trent. You walk away from my niece. You delete her number. You never approach her building again. You cease to exist in her universe. If you do that, I leave these files locked in my desk drawer. That is federal extortion, he hissed. No, Trent. That is an aggressive family boundary. The DOJ already has an active file on you. You are going down regardless. I am just offering you a golden opportunity to avoid adding a felony stalking charge to your federal indictment. Okay. I will leave her alone. If I hear you even breathed in her direction, these JPEGs go straight to the U.S. Attorney's desk. Do we have an understanding? Understood. I hung up the phone. Chloe was sitting on my couch, shaking. Are you really going to let him get away with it? Absolutely not. But I am going to execute it on my timeline. First, we guarantee you are 100% untethered from his blast radius. Then, I hand-deliver the flash drive to Sarah Jenkins and let the federal government do what they do best. 1 month later, with Chloe completely insulated, I dropped the encrypted drive on Sarah's desk. 3 months after that, the FBI raided Trent's brokerage firm. He was indicted on 17 counts of money laundering and racketeering. Chloe moved on with her life. She dove into her career, went to therapy, and learned how to trust her own instincts again. And I went back to my quiet, retired routine, resting easy, knowing I had neutralized another threat to my family. Emily joked with me recently, "Mom, you are like a retired vigilante angel. You sit quietly knitting in the corner until someone threatens us, and then you just ruthlessly burn their empire to the ground. It is not about vengeance, Emily. It never was. I know. It is about love. It is about making sure the monsters don't win." Exactly. Today, 5 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I look back on the entire chaotic journey. Richard Sterling was released on parole a few months ago after serving 8 years. He is totally bankrupt. He lives in a dingy one-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. He works as a low-level bookkeeper for a small logistics company. The towering arrogance has been completely broken. The man who thought he was a god among insects learned, in the most brutal way possible, that he bleeds just like everyone else. Preston remarried. He married a public school teacher in Colorado, a tough, no-nonsense woman who apparently does not tolerate his old toxic habits. From what I hear through the grapevine, he is a completely different husband. Humble, supportive, quiet. Sometimes, hitting absolute rock bottom actually forces a man to rebuild his character. Eleanor is still happily married to her professor. I got a lovely card from her last week, thanking me again for being the catalyst that saved her life. Chloe is engaged to a structural engineer, a kind, boring, painfully honest man. She learned how to spot the red flags, and she chose safety and respect over flashy cars. Trent is currently serving a 10-year stretch in federal lockup. Turns out, the money he was washing belonged to a cartel. He is lucky he is in prison. And my Emily? She is radiant. Her design agency exploded to the point where she had to open a second branch. She has 20 full-time employees. She wins awards, she is respected in her industry, and she is fiercely independent. And best of all, she is 7 months pregnant with my first biological grandchild. "Mom," she said to me yesterday, resting her hands on her baby bump, "if it is a girl, Daniel and I want to name her Margaret. After you." I broke down in tears. There are no words in the English language to describe the sheer weight of that honor. As for me, I have finally, truly accepted my retirement. I do not need to run background checks anymore. I do not need to operate in the shadows. My family is secure. They are happy. They are building honest, healthy, beautiful lives. Sometimes Sarah Jenkins still calls me for an off-the-record consultation on a convoluted tax evasion scheme. I give her my 2 cents, but I stay out of the crossfire. I fought my wars. It is a time for peace. On Sunday afternoons, when my entire chaotic, loud, wonderful family packs into my apartment for dinner, I sit back and watch them. I look at the tangible results of that one terrifying phone call I made 5 years ago. A family free of abuse. Emily laughing hysterically with Daniel. Chloe sketching out wedding plans. The kids running around the living room. All of them together, whole and safe. And I know, down to my bones, that it was all worth it. Every second of doubt, every sleepless night agonizing over the fallout. It was worth the heavy price. Because stepping into the line of fire to protect the people you love is never the wrong choice. Wielding your knowledge to crush a bully is never a sin. Richard Sterling genuinely believed that true power was the ability to humiliate the weak, to control the narrative, to hover above the law. But he learned the hard way that true power is entirely silent. True power is highly strategic. True power is knowing exactly when and where to strike the fatal blow. Sometimes, the most terrifying power in the world is just a seemingly insignificant retired woman standing in a hallway, making a single phone call. A phone call that burns a corrupt empire to ash. Today, as I water my tomatoes on the balcony, watching the sun set over the Chicago skyline, I feel total, profound peace. I do not need to be Special Agent Margaret Sullivan ever again. I can just be Grammy Maggie, the woman who bakes killer brownies and tells stories to the toddlers. But if one day, at some future Sunday potluck, a new face shows up and my radar starts screaming, well, I still have Sarah's direct line saved in my contacts. And my memory for forensic accounting is as sharp as a scalpel, because the wolves will always be out there. Arrogant predators who think they can exploit, abuse, and steal without ever facing the music. But as long as I am still breathing, I will guarantee that in my family, the wolves get slaughtered, not for revenge, but for love. Because at the end of the day, everything I did out of a mother's love. It is the most lethal force on the planet, the kind of love that moves mountains, topples billionaires, and fiercely shields its own. And if that reality terrifies a few corrupt men out there, good. They should be terrified, because as long as there are mothers like me walking the earth, arrogant criminals will have to think twice before they try to break our daughters. And that, I have realized, is the greatest legacy I could ever leave behind. Not a trust fund, not social status, but the absolute certainty that quiet women are often the most dangerous people in the room. That true knowledge is a weapon. That justice occasionally requires a heavy push. And that real love protects, always. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our new stories. Let me know in the comments. Would you have had the courage to do what Margaret did? What was the moment that shocked you the most? Oh, and if you want to hear more exclusive stories and get early access to our videos, become a channel member today. We have a lot of special content waiting for you there. See you next time.